Regular meeting of the Mishawaka Common Council for January 8th, 2024 to order. Please place all electronic devices on mute, remove hats, and please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Carroll. Mr. Banicki.
Here.
Mr. Emmons.
Here.
Mrs. Hahn. Here. Mr. Mamalenti.
Here.
Mr. Violi.
Here.
Mr. Hicksonball.
Here.
I would like to open the floor for nominations for President of the Council for the year 2024.
Madam Chair, it's my honor and privilege to nominate for President of our board, the Honorable Mr. Greg Hicksonball for President for 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any more nominations? I will entertain a motion to close nominations.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of closing nominations signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Madam Clerk, will you please poll the council on the nomination of Mr. Hicksonball for council president?
Mr. Hazen.
Yes.
Mrs. Volker.
Yes.
Mr. Carroll.
Yes.
Mr. Banicki.
Yes.
Mr. Emmons.
Yes.
Mrs. Hahn.
Yes.
Mr. Mamalenti.
Yes.
Mr. Violi.
Yes.
Mr. Hicksonball.
Yes.
Congratulations, Mr. Hicksonball.
Thank you, colleagues. And at this time, I will open the floor for nominations for the position of Council Vice President for 2024. Mr. Mamalenti.
Thank you, Mr. President. This time I'd like to nominate as for Vice President, Mr. Ron Banicki.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Then hearing none, I will entertain a motion to close nominations.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. A motion has been made and seconded to close nominations for the position of Vice President. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And with that, Madam Clerk, will you please poll the council on the nomination of Mr. Banicki for the position of Vice President?
Mr. Hazen?
Yes.
Mrs. Volker?
Yes.
Mr. Carroll?
Yes.
Mr. Banicki?
Yes.
Mr. Emmons?
Yes.
Ms. Hahn?
Yes.
Mr. Mamalenti?
Yes.
Mr. Violi?
Yes.
Mr. Hicksonball?
Yes.
Nomination passes 9-0.
Congratulations, Mr. Banicki.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you all. Thank you. And with that, we will return to our regular agenda in order of business, beginning with approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of December 18th, 2023. Are there any additions or corrections? Then hearing none, the minutes will stand approved as received from the clerk's office. Petitions, communications, remonstrance, and memorial.
Yes, Mr. President, we have petition number 2023-27 to the honorable members of the Common Council, City of Mishawaka, Indiana. This is a PUD amendment to allow a convenience store with gas station and C1 parking standards, Lot 2 of Capitol and 12th PUD minor subdivision. This petition is signed by John Friedline. Petition number 2023-28, the Common Council, City of Mishawaka, Indiana. This is a PUD amendment for increased building height, 69 feet, reduced parking space, 6 feet, and pavement drive aisle setback, 0 feet, and outdoor open space for various uses, Lot 1 and 2 of the enclave at Grandview Minor Subdivision. This is signed by Richard Deal.
Thank you. This evening, we have no report of any special committee, so we'll move into ordinances on first reading.
Proposed ordinance number 2024-01, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Mishawaka amending Chapter 2, Article 2 of the Municipal Code of the City of Mishawaka, Indiana, as from time to time amended of the City of Mishawaka, Indiana. This is amending the council procedural rules.
Proposed ordinance 2024-01 will be assigned to the Personnel Committee. This evening, we have no resolutions, so we'll move into ordinances on second reading.
Proposed ordinance number 2023-57, an ordinance amending Chapter 137 of the Municipal Code of the City of Mishawaka, Indiana, as from time to time amended, commonly known as the zoning ordinance of 1966 of the City of Mishawaka, Indiana. This is to rezone from C1 General Commercial to C4 Automobile Oriented, 411 West McKinley.
Thank you. The record will reflect that since we have, as of yet, not appointed our committees, this matter will be presented to the council as a whole. And with that, we will now move into second reading and public hearing on proposed ordinance 2023-57. Anyone wishing to speak in favor, if you would, please come forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Is there anyone here to speak with regard to 411 West McKinley? It appears that there is.
Andy Morrison, 4351 Chase Circle, Zionsville, Indiana. I am the petitioner. I own and operate Take 5 Oil Changes in Indiana, and we have a proposed project at 411 West McKinley Avenue. It is currently zoned C1, and we are proposing a rezone to C4 to allow for a drive-through oil change use. Take 5 Oil Change is a 10-minute drive-through oil change concept. We don't do many ancillary products and services, really focus on just the oil change. So we'll do wiper blades, air filters, cabin air filters, and an occasional coolant exchange, but really that's it. So the guest remains in their vehicle for the duration of the service. Bay times are about 9 minutes. Take 5 is a national brand. My cousin and I are partners. We have 23 operating in Indiana. And we just opened, well, the brand just opened their 1,000th location nationwide. So pretty quick growth. And so, yeah, we're proposing a rezone to C4 from C1. It's currently a vacant bank site, but proposing a rezone to C4 to allow for a drive-through oil change use.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the petitioner? Mr. Benicki?
Yes, thank you. Will this be a pit-style unit where basically you drive over whoever's servicing the car?
That's correct. So they're about 30-inch deep pits, no basement. So yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then as far as in and out, is that going to be leave the entrance where it is currently now, one on the front and then one on the backside on Russ Street?
So we are, the proposed site plan calls for removing access from McKinley. So that curb cut would not be there. We have the 2 rear curb cuts off of Russ Avenue, but we worked with staff at length and decided that the best path forward was to remove access off of McKinley from a safety perspective.
And then at some point, we're going to have to widen that intersection. Is there going to be room for us to kind of infringe upon your property a little bit without affecting your business? If
Yeah,
that ever
there
comes?
will. Our building's about 1,750 square feet. And I mean, we can fit on a third to a half of an acre, and this one is almost a full acre, so we have plenty of room on the site, and that shouldn't be an issue.
I just don't want to see you get pinched in the future, so,
Exactly. No,
All
I
right.
appreciate it.
well, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benicki. Other questions? Mr. Mamalenti?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. I just want to confirm if you have no plans for a car wash at this location,
We do not.
okay? Even though that some of your national brands do have that.
Yeah, so the
Service.
car wash, it's all corporate owned.
Okay.
And so, yeah, this one is not, we call those co-developments. This one's not. This is just us in the oil change business.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions? Mrs. Volker?
I think this might not be a question for you. It might be a question for Ken.
Why don't we conclude with this gentleman, and then you can call Mr. Prince
Okay.
up to the podium later.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Mr. Emmons?
Yeah. That bank building, when do you propose to demolish that building?
I mean, immediately after if this were successful and approved, and then, I mean, we'd have to go through the building permit process, but demolition would probably begin late spring, early summer timeframe.
Well, that's what I'm asking. So it's not going to be in the winter time, it's going to be in the spring or summertime?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions? Then, sir, thank you for the information. Welcome to the community. I am inclined to support this, but one thing that I would ask is, and from the business model that you described, it doesn't feel like it is going to be a noxious use that's going to upset the neighbors.
Sure.
But even though that's been used as a bank for these many years, it's in close proximity to some residences. So my hope would be that you and those who work for you are going to keep that in mind, and that you'll continue to be good neighbors to those folks who live directly south and adjacent to this property. So even though you may operate from elsewhere, if you can do everything you can as a responsible business owner to keep an eye on those type of issues, I'm sure we'd all appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor, if you would, please come forward. Then is there anyone participating remotely who wishes to speak in favor? Is there anyone here this evening who wishes to speak in opposition? Please come forward.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, if you would, please begin with your name and address
Yep.
for the record.
Hey, my name is Martin Ufkin.
Actually, I think you can step back just a tad.
How's that?
I'll come a little bit closer.
Okay.
Now a little bit, no, you're fine.
Okay,
You're-
thank you. All right, my name is Martin Ufkin, and I live at 2113 Liberty Drive, Mishawaka, Indiana. All right. President, members of the council, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Martin Ufkin. I have lived at 2113 Liberty Drive for the past 10 years with my wife and now our 8-month-old daughter. My house will be directly south of the proposed Russ Avenue entrance for Take 5 Oil. I spoke previously at the Planning Commission when this zoning proposal was originally being presented by the developer, Mr. Morrison. Nice to meet you in person, Mr. Morrison. I felt that my concerns for the safety of residents and drivers of the area were not adequately considered. Over the past 10 years, I've witnessed how the intersection of Russ and Liberty Avenue attracts many accidents. When Grape crosses McKinley and becomes Liberty, it abruptly goes from a 2-lane to a 1-lane street. Oftentimes, distracted drivers, unfamiliar with the abrupt merging of lanes, are forced to attempt to outrun another car when their own lane suddenly disappears. This puts any cars slowing down to turn west onto Russ Avenue, including future Take 5 customers, in danger. Trust me, I've seen it happen many times. Twice we have ended up with car parts in our front lawn, once even a whole car. My primary concern with this proposal is the plan to remove the McKinley entrance. This will only increase traffic turning west onto Russ Avenue. At the Planning Commission, Mr. Morrison argued that they consulted traffic studies. He claimed the studies said that their business would have less traffic than other businesses, such as fast food or a bank, which was, a bank being previously located on the site. However, the bank had the McKinley entrance open, lessening the traffic onto Russ. Furthermore, such traffic studies would not have looked at the traffic flow for this specific intersection. Here is another reason why traffic flow on Russ Avenue is a concern. Often drivers heading east down McKinley don't want to have to stop at McKinley's stoplights. Instead, they decide to take Russ Avenue, usually turning off Benton Street or Forest Avenue. They race down Russ at 50 miles per hour in order to skip the McKinley lights. This situation is already a hazard to the residents off of Russ Avenue. The increased traffic necessary to access Take 5 could exacerbate the problem. Again, if the McKinley entrance is closed. Limiting access to Take 5 Oil via Russ Avenue is my main concern, but not my only one. I've never seen an oil change business, and no offense, Mr. Morrison, that isn't an eyesore. I question how adding this business may affect my property value. At least the bank had nice landscaping and shrubbery that created a nice partition between business and residents. Could something similar be enforced for this new business? Take 5 Oil also briefly addressed the concerns about added noise and pollution. Perhaps Take 5 could contain some of the environmental hazards, but they wouldn't have control, obviously, over the noise and pollution of the customer cars running while waiting in line. Thank you for listening to my concerns and for your future actions to address the safety of Mishawaka. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Hold on a second if you would, and let's see if any of my colleagues have any questions for you.
Sure.
Are there any questions for this gentleman? Mrs. Volker?
Thank you. I just wanted to say hello. You and I have met.
Oh.
I think when I was campaigning.
Okay.
Anyway, I was actually, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to Mr. Prince, his concern about your house and the proximity of the business to your house and increased traffic on
Yeah.
Russ and Liberty. I drive down Liberty frequently, and even though I've lived here for 30 years, I have actually gotten caught occasionally. I tend not to race the car next to me, but I have gotten caught at that intersection, and so I can see how that happens. So I echo your concern
Thank you.
about the traffic.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for this gentleman? Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else with us this evening who wishes to speak in opposition? Please come forward. Then is there anyone participating remotely who wishes to speak in opposition? And at this point, we'll open it up for questions and comments from the council, beginning with Mrs. Volker's questions for Mr. Prince.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council.
So the questions I actually were my initial question was, were the neighbors notified? And obviously, there's somebody here from the neighborhood, so they were notified.
Standard notification was mailed,
Right.
correct.
And so the question, so I'll just echo the questions about the merging of traffic, the closure of McKinley, and then also landscaping to protect the neighbors from the business of the oil change shop.
Okay, I'll start with the closing of the entrance off of McKinley. So we had extensive discussions with the applicant regarding how access and how the circulation worked going into the facility. One of the items noted by engineering was the left turn movement from McKinley on the westbound traffic being able to turn into the site, which is why we're requesting that that access be closed. What happens is there's no turn lane because it's your stacking lane for your leftbound. When you're eastbound on McKinley, turning left onto Grape, which is the higher volume, you would be essentially stopping traffic in McKinley by stopping to make the turn into the oil change facility. We also requested that the applicant talk to the next door neighbor to the west regarding possibly using their access drive as a shared drive. The next door neighbor had no interest in that. At that point in time, we told the applicant that their only viable access was going to be off Russ. And at that point, they had to really debate whether it was worth pursuing this site or not pursuing the site. If another bank were to go into the property, that access would be grandfathered. Because of the change in use, we require the property to be brought up to code, which is why we're requesting that that access be closed concurrently with the change in use of the property.
Can I ask a question about that? What, did you think at all about a right in, right out only at that? So you could only turn right off of McKinley into the oil change and only right turning out?
We did, and I think it's an expense issue. So the standard, what I'll call pork chops, when you put one of those angled pieces of concrete, they never work. We do it in multiple locations, and they're just not feasible. The only way to really restrict the turning movement is to widen McKinley and put an unmountable median, which they don't have the right-of-way for and would be an extreme expense for what they are looking to do. So it would be their option to look into that and they could potentially do that. But with the amount of volume of traffic, our understanding from the applicant is they do, I think, 50 to 60 oil changes a day, and they can confirm that if you have an interest. But if you multiply that by the number of hours, that traffic is significantly less than what the bank was at peak times. So that's why, in part, we didn't have the same concern about the access to Russ Street because of that limited amount of traffic based on the number of oil changes that they do. This isn't like a gas station, I guess is what I'm saying.
So can you address the landscaping?
The landscaping, they would be required to meet our current landscaping for the C4 district. I haven't analyzed the existing landscaping at the bank site to see if that complies and that they could reuse it. They have identified on the site plan that I believe was distributed to everybody that they plan to retain that area on the south side of the property, so they may in fact already meet the landscaping and can retain it, which I believe from the remonstrator, that might be good news, that they could keep that existing landscaping that exists there rather than to remove it and replant something.
We don't have a site plan
Okay.
in this packet.
I'd echo Mrs. Volker's statement. I see the aerial, but I don't see a site plan.
I need to investigate why these things occur, Mr. President. I apologize.
Oh,
Let me pull up the,
You know, Mr. Morrison, if you can hand that to our staff, I think that they can project that.
Project
Can
it,
we
right.
not, Madam Clerk?
so on the aerial, you can see the dual curb cuts and the existing landscaping remaining, and you can see the area of existing paving that they would essentially be retained. And then the area to the north of it where you can see the line where it then becomes white that they would be looking to expand and build upon. So theoretically, they'll be able to retain the asphalt paving landscaping on that south side of the property.
So Russ Avenue is on the bottom of that
That is
page?
correct.
So there isn't really any, there is no protective landscaping between residential on Russ and,
So they would be required to plant trees as part of any site plan and change of use, they would be required to plant it. I'm only reacting to, I haven't, again, done the analysis of what exists on the property and what doesn't. I'm only reacting to what was indicated by the remonstrator that said the landscaping looked good on the bank.
but there's nothing along here that I can see.
There
along
is a
Russ
landscape
Avenue.
bed, so if you look at the parking between the sidewalk and where the parking is, there is a landscape bed in there. I'm not sure if it has shrubbery in it or not. A tree, you would see the shadows. So you can see on the adjacent property, there's a tree. On the property to the east, you can see the tree and the shadow that's projected. I know the aerial is difficult to see.
So there's some hedges. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Prince while we have him at the podium? Mr. Mamalenti?
Thank you, Mr. Hicksonball. Quick question. So based on the comment that you had made, if any other project or property goes in here other than a bank, that McKinley entrance will be eliminated, correct? If it...
I use the bank as an example, but no, now it's a more technical question. So if it is equal or less intense than a bank, they could go in there and not make any improvements. A good example would be an office. It could become a doctor's office, could become an urgent care, and no improvements would be required. If it became a restaurant, which is also permitted in the C1 district, that would be a change of use that would warrant then the upgrade. There's a different parking requirement, et cetera, even though it's permitted in the C1 district. So it's a little more complicated than that, but you get the gist of
Sure.
that non-conforming status.
Okay. And then it would be up to the petitioner to pay for those improvements if those were suggested, if they wanted to have an entrance on McKinley or...
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Prince? Ken, if I can piggyback on my friend Mr. Mamoletti's questions to a certain extent, set aside the issue of the ingress and egress off of McKinley, but just with respect to a C1 use. And that's what this property is currently zoned, correct?
That is correct.
So if the bank sold this to an individual who would plan to make use of it in conjunction with our C1 zoning, there would not be any rezoning that would be necessary, no action for the council to take, correct?
That is correct.
And I won't bore everybody with the entire list, but it appears that there are about, would you agree with me, 134 commercial uses within a C1 district that would presumptively be possible on this site.
That is correct.
And just to point out a few things such as tobacco stores, which I would assume would be much more problematic for the neighborhood, potentially. A whole variety of new uses, and again, I'm not going to go through all 134, but my point is that without any action on the part of any governmental entity in Mishawaka, if in fact the property was transferred to somebody who was going to use it in conjunction with that C1 commercial use, we would have no control over that unless they otherwise violated a separate provision of the municipal code.
That is correct, Mr. President.
So when it comes to, and I'm sensitive, I think we all are, to the neighbor's concern with regard to that buffering and some of the things that we've been able to do on different sites when it's amenable to natural sound barriers that can help make certain uses more consistent with a neighborhood setting. As part of the site plan process, will any of that be addressed if this is approved this evening, will the petitioner, as part of the site plan process and working with staff and the Plan Commission, be asked to address that separate and distinct from whether the use is allowable?
We will definitely be required to review the landscaping plan that includes planting along that edge. I will say that unlike where a commercial property abuts immediately adjacent to a residential property, there would be no evergreen or fencing requirement because of the clear vision area required to see to get in and out of the business. The fence would essentially block your ability to see.
And then with regard to that age-old problem with McKinley, and I've had people cut me off. I don't think it was Mrs. Volker who did it, but I think we've all seen people do that. Has there been any discussion, and this perhaps may be a question better posed to the city engineer, but has there ever been any discussion of a fix for that particular predicament and the problems on McKinley that you addressed earlier in your comments?
I can tell you that we have no current capital improvement project planned for this area, and we do have in other areas where we have multiple lanes being reduced, we have the same problem. It's not unique to this location. I will say, and I think it's referenced on the drawing, you can see how and I'm not sure if this improves it or not, but there was discussion, you can see where that point of constriction where it angles back into one lane. There was talk of potentially removing that restriction to have a designated right turn lane onto Russ to help that free flow, to stop that conflict. And I'm not sure if that makes it better or worse, as you identified, it's a better question for the city engineer, whether that makes it better or makes it worse. It's really an engineering decision.
Thank you. I appreciate your help. Mr. Benicki.
Thank you. Mr. Prince, if I'm not mistaken, the building on the northeast corner, it's a little out of repair shop now, wasn't
That is correct. That used to be oil
was a quick move
change,
at
correct.
one point too.
Yes.
So, I mean, I just don't, while it's a much bigger footprint, I don't think that it's that much different for the neighborhood.
Part of our decision in recommending approval was the existing auto-related uses that exist. You have the gas station obviously immediately to the north of that, and you have the car wash across the street. So that was part of our basis of decision as well.
And so really kind of north of Russ has always kind of been commercial or automotive type use. I mean,
As you know from McKinley, it changes as you go down, but automobile is definitely prevalent.
yeah, and I can attest that when you're heading west on McKinley and you're trying to turn left into that bank entrance, you will get hit. My son did. So crossing that traffic there is just brutal. So closing that entrance is probably a positive thing, even though it does move some traffic to the back to Russ. It eliminates some major accidents because they're moving at much faster speeds on McKinley than they are Liberty. So thank you.
I'll pass that on to Chris Jamros. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Prince? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And we are still at the stage of questions and comments from the council. Are there any other questions or comments? Then, Mr. Morrison, if you would be so kind if you could come forward again. And I appreciate your patience with us as we work through this, but hopefully you heard not only from the neighbor, but from the questions of the council, the concerns that we have.
For sure.
Having heard that, as you conceive of the site plan that you and your organization will put together, would you be willing to take a look at anything that our staff would work with you to suggest that would help serve as a further buffer between your operation and the neighborhood, if it is possible, given the layout of the site?
Yes.
I appreciate that. Would you also be willing, have you ever had a chance to talk to the gentleman who spoke to us this evening, your soon-to-be neighbor, if this goes through?
I attended the planning commission meeting virtually and was able to respond to some of his comments, but we haven't spoken in person.
Then if you had the time, would you be willing to commit to meeting with this gentleman this evening to try to further understand what his concerns are and see if there's anything that you and your organization could do to try to address them?
I would, yeah.
I appreciate that. One other question that I don't think was asked, just for clarification, what will be the hours of operation? If I live next door, I'd want to know when you're going to
Yeah.
be open.
So standard hours are 7 to 7 Monday through Saturday and 10 to 5 on Sundays.
Okay. What about vehicular traffic service vehicles? Obviously, the oil has to be delivered from someplace. So if I live next door, what would I expect to be the noise and the frequency that I'm going to see tankers that will be in my neighborhood?
So typically oil is delivered once a week, midday, and then used oil would be picked up either weekly or bi-weekly, depending on the volume of the store. I guess one other comment. So our average, we have 23 operating. Our average oil changes per day right now fluctuates between 32 and 33. And so we're open for 12 hours a day, essentially, 6 days a week, and then 7 hours on Sundays. And so we've had numerous traffic trip generation reports and studies done on ingress and egress, and basically everyone says the max vehicles entering and exiting the site in peak hours are anywhere from like 6 to 8, so much less intense than fast food or bank or anything else like that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Morrison? Mrs. Volker?
Thank you very much. Just one quick one. How many bays will you have?
3.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for this gentleman? Then again, thank you, sir, and if you could touch base with the neighbor in the back of the chambers before you leave, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the council? Then hearing none, I will call for the question.
Question.
Madam Clerk, would you please poll the council?
Yes.
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 Proposed ordinance passes 9-0. Proposed ordinance number 2023-58, an ordinance amending Chapter 137 of the Municipal Code of the City of Mishawaka, Indiana, as from time to time amended, commonly known as the zoning ordinance of 1966 of the City of Mishawaka, Indiana. This is PUD amendment for rezone from C1 General Commercial to R1 Single Family Residential, 617 East Grove Street.
Thank you. The record will reflect that as with the prior ordinance, this matter is being presented to the council as a whole. And with that, we will now move into second reading of public hearing on proposed ordinance 2023-58. Anyone wishing to speak in favor, if you would, please come forward to the podium. Is there anyone here or participating remotely who wishes to speak in favor of the proposal for 617 East Grove Street? Mr. Mamalenti, oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to make a suggestion. I would like to move that we postpone this ordinance until our next meeting and give the homeowner, or property owner, the opportunity to come and speak.
Second.
Thank you. A motion has been made and seconded to postpone further public hearing on proposed ordinance 2023-58 until our next regularly scheduled council meeting 2 weeks from this evening. Any additional questions or comments from the council? Then hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, so this matter will be postponed until our next council meeting. And with that, we'll move into privilege of the floor. And this is an opportunity for members of the public to come to the podium and speak with respect to non-agenda items only under privilege of the floor. And is there anyone participating remotely who wishes to speak under privilege of the floor? Thank you. Hearing no one, we'll move into unfinished business, of which there is none, new business. And at this time, we have some more annual organizational work to do. So the chair would entertain a motion to approve the list of council committees and appointments, the appointment of Mr. Triple as council attorney, and the appointments to the various boards and commissions, with the specifics being reflected as are set out in the sheet that was distributed to us by the clerk's office.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. A motion is made and seconded to approve our various appointments for 2024, consistent with the document that was distributed to the council. Are there any additional questions or comments from the council? Then hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. The matter carries. Congratulations to all on your appointments. And then we also have the acceptance of the annual conflict of interest forms for council members. And at this time, Madam Clerk, would you please read the names of individuals who have submitted the form?
Dale Woody Emmons, Matt Carroll, Anthony Tony Hazen, Anthony Tony Violi, Greg Hicksonbaugh, Matt Mamalenti.
Thank you. And at this time, I would entertain a motion to, excuse me, Mr. Emmons.
I have no new business.
Let us take care of this piece of business first, and then we'll move into other new business, Mr. Emmons. So at this time, the chair would entertain a motion to accept the conflict of interest forms for the individuals whose names were read by the clerk.
So moved?
Second.
Thank you. A motion has been made and seconded to acknowledge the acceptance of the conflict of interest forms for the council members whose names were read by the clerk. Any additional questions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. With that, other new business, Mr. Emmons.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Since the new year started, we're starting our neighborhood meeting, the West End neighborhood meeting. It will be on the 18th of this month, and our speaker will be Ken Cotter, prosecuting attorney, and so it should be interesting. It's a follow-up of other meetings that we've had with people talking about the police department, and so it should be an interesting meeting. Starts at 7 o'clock at St. Babel's, and as usual, West End Bakery donuts will be served. So I look forward to seeing everybody there for the first one in 1924. Thank you. Did I say 19? 2024. Thank you.
Thank you. Other new business, Mr. Mamalenti.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a brief reminder that Twin Branch Neighborhood Watch meeting will meet January 17th. And instead of the typical 7 o'clock meeting, we'll meet at 5:30. And we will be meeting at the Mishawaka Historical Museum for a brief tour and take a look around, answer any questions, or ask any questions that you may have. That's 5:30, January 17th. Hope to see everybody there. All are welcome.
Thank you. Is there any other new business to come before the council? And if not, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
We're adjourned. Thank you, folks.